Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RightScale Zend joint customer case study for Mediaspike. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. We are going to begin the webinar shortly, but before we do, we find it interesting to do a few polling questions to get a sense of who's attending this webinar with us, and I'm going to show you those in a moment. I want to say in advance that we will all see the answers together, so we can get a sense of the kind of attendance that we're having here. And I don't mean numbers, but some qualitative questions here. So please, let's start the first poll. And the question is, are you using the cloud today as an infrastructure as a service? And you can select only one of those four options. Yes, you're using it with a serious project, at least one project that is gaining in importance, you're exploring it, or not at all. And the answers are coming in, and I will be sharing the results with you in a brief moment. Shall we go ahead? All right. So it looks like we have quite a few people that are beginning to explore, and not a small amount that are not using it at all. So this should be interesting for those people, especially. It's useful to see this data so we can perhaps tailor the information a little bit accordingly. So now the next polling question. Are you using cloud management? And the options are, you can select only one. Yes, but from the cloud provider. Are you using RightScale today? Are you using cloud management from a third party? No, but you're looking into whether you should be using cloud management or not at all. And again, the votes are coming in, and we will be sharing that information with you in a moment once we have almost everybody having submitted their votes. So we can see it. And let's go. And let's see. It looks like the large majority is also exploring here or not at all. So perhaps for you people in the bracket, you'll hear information about what could be interesting for you there that you might want to consider. And now the next polling question. How many PHP applications do you have in production? None, just one, 2 or 4, or lots of them, 5 or more. And lots of votes are coming in right now. I will share with you that momentarily. I see the votes coming in. And yeah, let's share it. And lots. 2 or 4 and 5 or more made the large majority here. So lots of experienced PHP people. Fantastic. And now this is the last polling question that I'm going to ask you next. What is important to you in a cloud PHP solution? In this case, you can check all the ones that apply. Ease of deployment or management, ability to fully customize, scalability and performance, high availability and fault tolerance, automation. Which ones are important to you? And these are not mutually exclusive. That's why we want you to be able to pick several, as it might pertain. Let me see. We have the votes coming in. A few more moments for the majority to be able to register. And yeah, let's go ahead and share the results. And yeah, so this is interesting. Ease of deployment and scalability measure really high in there, also high availability. And you're actually going to hear about those things in automation, which is part of the agenda here. So it looks like the topics that the majority of the people are looking for is what we chose to cover here. So great validation just from the start. So with that, let's begin the webinar itself. On the panel and speaking, oops, let me go over here. On the panel and speaking right now is myself, Yuri Budnik. I'm the director of the ISV Partner Program at RightScale. We will have, in a few moments, Ken Mitchell, who's the Senior Director of Product Management from Zend, to tell us a little bit more about Zend PHP and the technologies and how RightScale and Zend work together, in fact. But most of the presentation itself is going to be held by Mark Moline, and he's going to talk about how Mediaspike uses the technology that RightScale and Zend has created together to address and to solve their infrastructure issues in technology and to be able to power their website. We will have a Q&A period at the end of the presentation, but we can actually take questions throughout. And sometimes as we see them come in and they're appropriate to whatever is being discussed, we might be able to weave them in. So by all means, feel free to submit your questions as you might come up with them. You don't need to hold them until the end. So now that we're done with the introductions, what you're going to hear next is a brief amount of information about RightScale itself and Zend in our partnership and how we work together. And we'll move right along to Mark's discussion on actual practical use cases on Mediaspike, right into the Q&A. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about RightScale. It's a cloud management platform, hence the questions that you heard about it earlier today. And just to give you a sense of the scale that we're operating on, our customers have launched almost 4 million servers now, and the number of servers that we launch every day and every month for our customers in this management platform that we have for them increases quite dramatically. So some people think that some of these technologies might be too new or maybe not quite proven, and I can tell you in no uncertain terms that this is all production quality technology that's been used for quite a few years. In fact, we have 100 million people that touch RightScale managed servers every day. We really are powering some of the largest production environments in the cloud. And when we say cloud now, it really means infrastructure as a service from companies like Amazon that has Amazon Web Services and the Elastic Compute Cloud, and Rackspace has a Rackspace Cloud, and there's quite a few others, SoftLayer and LogicWorks and Tata InstaCloud in India. There's quite a few of these, but it actually now is shifted to include private data center servers also, because you can deploy them in the same way. So many times when we mean cloud now, we mean public cloud, private cloud, hybrid environments. And as you can see from the logos here, it covers a wide swath of verticals and industries, anything from social gaming to media to somebody that's a toy maker to pharmaceuticals. So it really applies broadly. And the reason our customers use RightScale is to make it easier to deploy their environments, and you're going to hear some about that in the Mediaspike use case, and to make it dramatically less complicated and human capital intensive to maintain them. It's really because of this idea of highly automated environments that you don't need lots of people to maintain them, that have a lot of automation that kicks in when perhaps a component fails or when you need to auto-scale the capacity of your environment based on how many visitors you might have at that moment, and having complete control over all the different resources that you have, being able to have different programmers or developers or sysadmins that have different levels of access. And as I was talking about multi-cloud before, we're not going to speak about that particularly in this case, but the idea that you can develop an environment that runs in Amazon today, and maybe a few years from now, there's a different provider with different features or pricing, the ability to move it there or bring it into your own private data center. That's what we mean when we talk about cloud management, but most of all, you're going to see it in action. That's why we want to keep this part of the presentation shorter. And with that in mind, I'm passing the presentation now to Kent Mitchell from Zend, so he can speak to us a little bit about that.
Okay, hi everybody. This is Kent Mitchell from Zend. If you don't know who Zend is, you're probably not a PHP person, and we had some people who had no PHP applications, so I'll give you a little bit of background. If you are a PHP person, you've probably heard of us. We're the commercial arm of PHP, so sort of like Red Hat is to Linux, that's what Zend is to PHP. We've been around for more than 10 years. We have more than 40,000 customers, and some pretty interesting customers here. Starbucks Coffee, Coca-Cola, Cisco, you know, some of the companies you can see here, Disney, a lot of media companies, a lot of traditional companies across a broad range of platforms. And this, you know, our company was founded by our two founders were basically the guys that wrote the core engine in PHP. So that you know, is how the company got started. If we go to the next slide. Hello? Next slide. Okay, can you guys hear me? This webinar keeps telling me
Yeah,
I'm losing my connection.
we can hear you fine, Ken. Sorry, I
Okay,
was
good.
muted, so you couldn't hear me, but we can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure people can hear me. So this is essentially what Zend offers and why Zend versus open source. Zend offers a complete solution of products from design and development, where we have products like Zend Studio, which is an IDE based on top of Eclipse, and we add some pretty sophisticated PHP tooling on top of that. We have phpcloud.com, the Zend Developer Cloud, which gives people instant access to PHP stack running in the cloud, complete self-serve setup, complete collaboration support, and it runs the Zend application fabric. And then as a runtime platform, we provide a PHP application server, in essence, that provides the kind of capabilities you see here. So high availability support, transparent scalability, the ability to deploy in applications and provision them as you scale up and scale down, you know, a whole application performance monitoring and root cause system that allows you to diagnose what's going on with your applications when they don't work right. Not that anybody would ever make a mistake writing an application, but strangely enough, it does happen from time to time. And then there's a bunch of performance-related things like caching support, the ability to execute asynchronous jobs, and then, of course, then provide support and security hotfixes and the kinds of things that you're expecting. And then ultimately, that's delivered into a production ecosystem. In this case, we're here with RightScale today talking about the ability of RightScale's cloud management tools to provide the auto-scaling and the integration to the different infrastructures, Amazon, Rackspace, private clouds, et cetera. So through that solution that we've created with them, we can take the application fabric and really run you from development with an IDE and the developer cloud all the way through fully scalable production environments like Mark is going to talk about with Mediaspike. So let's move to the next slide. So why did Zend and RightScale get together on a PHP solution? The idea that we came up with was, how can we create something that has the value of paths, but with flexible configurable capabilities? And what we did in looking at this solution was take the experience of RightScale with how to create an environment that can scale up and scale down, be fault tolerant, handle all of the different configuration and setup options that people are going to want, and the expertise that Zend has in creating a scalable PHP environment. And we took those two things together, and we took their best practices and our best practices, and we created this solution pack that allows you to, out of the box, just by filling in a few simple variables, create effectively your own paths. And you can then load your applications into it, and this will automatically scale up and scale down based on your load. If you experience situations like some people are experiencing this morning with the new iPad announcement, your websites won't go down. They'll stay up. They'll scale. They'll handle that kind of load. And we provide on the Zend side, high performance scalable session clustering. We provide all of the things that you need on the PHP side. And then, for example, what RightScale brings to the table is database failover and recovery, and dual load balancing, and the other kinds of sort of self-healing things that you need from a production environment. So we got together because both of us have an area of expertise. There's very little overlap, and combined we create this great solution that runs on all these different clouds. Next.
Thank you very much, Ken. And with that, I would now like to pass the presentation to Mark Moline. That's, as I mentioned earlier, he's actually going to put some of these ideas that Kent and I have been discussing into actual practice with a real-life example of how they're using it. So with that, Mark, please take it away.
All right. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, Kent. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Moline. I am the technical director for Mediaspike here in Boston, Massachusetts. Quick background on who we are. We are a 10-year-old company based in Boston, Brookline to be specific, for those of you who know the area. We have 7 full-time employees, looking to add an 8th, need a new developer, and 2 dogs, Chester and Mason. Chester's there on the left. Next slide. What do we do? Mediaspike is at the forefront of lead generation for online and traditional campus-based colleges and universities. We have 2 primary sites, achieveyourcareer.com and findyourdegree.com, which combined with a few custom B2B portals that we create, we're delivering thousands of leads every day for our clients. We do this through custom-built matching algorithms that take the student information and select them, match them with the best programs that are the best fit for their educational goals. And we do a lot of this through very high-volume targeted traffic campaigns. Next slide, please. How do we do it? Our leads come in through the 2 primary websites that I mentioned. They are initially validated there, but then sent to a central processing system that does all of the heavy lifting for validation and duplication checking, making sure that certain requirements are met, and so on. And then the leads are sent out in real time to the client schools so that they can get the student on the phone generally within minutes after they've hit the submit button on our site. Next slide, please. Thank you. Hey, how did we do it before? Before RightScale, I'm getting my audio is fading in and out. See if I can talk a little bit louder. Let's see. How did we do it before RightScale? Was with one giant server. We had one giant server at a dedicated server farm. It just kept getting bigger and bigger. Each time we would get more traffic, more business. We'd just sign a contract for a new server that was twice as big as the one before and think everything over and keep going. It had its problems, but it worked. It just, we knew it wasn't going to last forever. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what were the problems? Mostly we had no room for traffic bursts. Marketing would come down the hall and knock on my door and say, we want to launch this campaign. Do we have room on the server to do it? And that's not a good way to get traffic to your site. The whole system was fragile. You know, we didn't necessarily want to upgrade MySQL because we weren't sure if it was going to break something else in the process. Everything was running on that one machine. It became a single point of failure. And then it also encouraged that wonderful practice of, I don't need to run the build script. I'll just hack this file right here on the live site. Everybody's done this before, I know, and it's a good way to get things out of sync. So those are just a few of the top issues that we were having with our giant single server solution, and we knew that we needed something better.
So Mark,
Yes.
So Mark, this is Joey speaking. I got a question for you about this. So as you were experiencing this situation that you're describing, did you have experience with cloud computing at that point? Is that something that you know about? Because you mentioned S3, but were you using servers in the cloud anywhere yet?
Yes. At this point, when we were still on our single server, we were using S3 for our backups. We'd do our database dumps and shuffle them off to S3, and we'd keep Subversion repository dumps over into S3. But that was about it. We weren't really doing anything with any virtual EC2 instances or really anything beyond S3. We weren't even using S3 for content delivery at that point.
So you were essentially just using S3 as a nice big online backup storage area.
A giant hard drive that never runs out of space.
Mm.
So I'm sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, and so then when you started looking at this kind of a situation that you were in, what did you start looking at, in way of a solution? Did you start looking at cloud management solutions? How did you end up sort of moving towards the cloud, and what was your thought processes there?
Sure. Well, we were in the planning meeting talking about how much business was anticipating growing in the next year, and it's like, well, we're going to need another server, another bigger server, and that just wasn't going to happen. We knew that we needed to start to distribute our load. So we started to look at a few different solutions. The first was a completely managed solution where we're still leasing all the hardware and paying somebody at the data center to manage it for us. But then again, we're tied into that hardware. We also looked at purchasing our own hardware and putting it at a colo somewhere, and then paying for the rack space and paying for the bandwidth and whatnot, and also hiring another system administrator to run all of that for us. And then the other option was the cloud. And looking at Amazon and the rack space cloud and some of the other options out there, the pricing model was just so flexible and so attractive. And the ability to change your instances to what suited your business the best is really what drove the decision for us.
Okay, interesting.
So maybe this is a good time to get more details into what that decision was, Mark.
Sure. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is what we have today. We've gone from that one giant server to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 servers at any one time. And this is just the production side. We start at the top with 2 load balancers that are sharing the load and distributing that across the Zend server cluster, which usually has 2 nodes running in it, but can go up to 3, 4, 5 or more if we need it. Those Zend server cluster nodes are all coordinated with the Zend server cluster manager, which is a standard part of the RightScale Zend high availability solution. That's the basic part for the servers. Then we added on to that a memcache server and an external data gateway server that we use for communicating with some of our third-party vendors. Our database solution, 2 different MySQL 5 databases, the production database and our data warehouse server, and those are set up as master slaves, with the slaves operating in a separate Amazon availability zone. So for disastrous Amazon failures, we'll be able to recover faster with a slave in a separate zone.
So Mark, thinking about this drawing, it seems like there's a number of things here that you were able to do with the cloud that you certainly wouldn't have been able to do with either of your other solutions. If you had somebody manage servers for you or you co-load your servers, you wouldn't have, like you said, databases in multiple availability zones and other things. Can you point out a few other things that sort of came out of looking at a cloud-based solution where you could, enhance your solution?
Absolutely. Well, just given the nature of physical hardware, the idea of adding more nodes to the cluster as need arises just you can't do that. So right away we would have ended up with a 2 or 3 node cluster and stuck there, whether we were using them all or not.
And paying for them even if you weren't using them.
Absolutely, and paying for them. Same with the database replication across availability zones. They would have been in the same data center, probably in the same rack. So if there's a catastrophic event that physically takes out the master machine, it's probably going to take out the slave as well, which is definitely not the case for us here. Some of the other customizations, our memcache server, we realized halfway through our deployment schedule that we needed this memcache server as opposed to a different caching solution that we were originally using. And launching it, deciding that we needed it, launching it and getting it online took about an hour, as opposed to the day or more that it would have taken to requisition actual hardware to be installed in a rack, wait for it to come up, wait for it to be configured, and so on. And that's really the flexibility of the solution, is to be able to bring up these instances when you need them. And if it's not big enough, you change the size. Or if it's too big, you bring it smaller. Either way, it's the flexibility as well.
Hey, Mark, I would like to ask you a question. I just want to point something out first. So keep in mind the diagram I showed earlier with the reference architecture that we created between Zend and RightScale. And then Mediaspike was able to then customize that to specifically what they needed, right? Adding the data warehouse, adding the memcache tier, having an external gateway. So that's what we were referencing earlier, that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but we just try to make it easier for somebody to have a good baseline to begin from. And then having said that, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to go from your architecture where everything fit into one box to spreading it out the way that we see it in your logical diagram here?
It was a learning curve at first, but everything went rather smoothly. I think part of that is because of our architecture going into the process. We had been building things to be as independent from one another, as decoupled from one another as they could, with the idea that we knew that our front end and our back end would always at some point be disconnected from each other and not living on the same box. So I think a lot of those early architecture decisions that we made years ago really paid off here in making the transition as smooth as it was. But beyond that, all of the basic move-in and porting of the application, RightScale's script and interface made it pretty easy to get that set up and running.
So that combined with the fact that you had some very good foresight early on to architect the application itself in a way that you had some good abstraction layers, you were able to move, I mean, literally from a single box to what we're looking at here that's put on an enterprise class environment that can literally scale based on load and has geographical redundancy and all those things. But can you tell us about how you manage the environment that we see here?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
So who manages the environment that you have now?
I do, and our other programmer, Sebastian, also helps to manage it. We don't have any system administrators on staff. We are programmers, and this is all pretty much managed by us. And on the rare occasions that we need something beyond our expertise, RightScale and Zend, we call them up, and there they are.
Great.
Mark, that leads to an interesting question. I mean, obviously, out of the box, we have this pre-built infrastructure, and then you've modified it. Can you talk a little bit about the process of how that was done? I mean, here's the templates, but then what happened after that? I mean, how did that process go, and how did people, work through the customizing of this infrastructure?
Sure. We got a lot of help in our onboarding process from RightScale engineers and what RightScale refers to as the virtual on-site session, which was a screen sharing conference call with a dedicated RightScale engineer in 4-hour blocks. And it was a great, the sessions were very productive. I believe we used 2 of them. And the RightScale engineers were such that they really had a great ask any question attitude. There was no dumb question. Just ask what you don't know. And they really helped us through the whole process there on the bumpy spots. Everything else, the RightScale interface for creating the instances and updating and modifying your server templates is very well documented for what inputs you need here and how that affects this other thing over there. It all flows together nicely.
So, Mark, I would like to remind everybody on the webinar that they can ask questions throughout so that we can have a few queued up as we go into the Q&A session at the very end. Don't wait until the end to submit your questions if you have them. And let me know when you want to talk about the next topic of the development environment, Mark.
Actually, there's actually a couple interesting questions here, Mark, that I think are sort of generic that might be interesting. what kind of traffic were you seeing, before, with your single server environment, and what kind of traffic are you seeing now? Is it the same level of traffic on average, or, how's your business grown, or how has this infrastructure allowed your business to grow as you've gone to this kind of a model?
Business is great. Our business before was good. Now with this solution, it's great because we have the capacity to handle what we need. We've been able to, almost from day one of launching our cloud solution, we've seen our traffic go up by probably 30%, just because we haven't had to worry about how much traffic we send to the site.
Right. If somebody wants to run a promo now, they can just run a promo, and you don't.
Exactly.
Say, oh no, we can run that in 2 weeks.
No, there's no worrying about it. In fact, I was at ZendCon last year, sitting in one of the sessions in the big room, and we had just gone live with RightScale about 6 weeks before ZendCon, and I was sitting there listening to the presentation. I got an alert on my phone, and I looked down to see that, oh, we have a new server in our Zend server cluster, and the load came on. The RightScale monitoring detected it, launched a new server for us. It added it to the cluster, and traffic kept going. 2 months before that, that would have been a phone call to me saying, how come the site's not responding? And then I would have had to drop whatever I was doing and go deal with that crisis. But to instead just be sitting there and get the alert that says, hey, by the way, everything's okay.
That certainly has to be peace of mind when you're, out for dinner with your wife or doing whatever and not have to worry about getting those phone calls anymore.
Absolutely. Now when the phone rings, it's really important.
Anything else, Yuri, before we move on? Or?
I think there's another question here that's also apropos, and this is for you, Mark. How did you build your node image? How do you update it when you upgrade your application or or to update some systems resources? Perhaps you can tell them a little bit about how the server templates work.
Sure. The server templates are really what takes the base machine image and describes how to put the software on it that you need to make your server do what you want it to do, whether it's going to be a database server or an Apache server or Memcache or whatever it's going to be. The server template is what's really going to tell it how to do that, which software to install and in what order, and how to configure it. So setting up the server cluster nodes, we went in and identified, now we've got some vhosts that are running on, we're actually running 3 vhosts on each of these server cluster nodes. So we had to modify our server templates, which were designed for a single vhost. And it was pretty much, I don't want to say it was as simple as cut and paste, but it wasn't much harder than cut and paste to take the single node or the single vhost template, modify it to support 3, change a few port numbers and a few variable names, and we were good to go.
So if I can add a little bit here, but in the more generic sense, since I'm not an expert on your architecture, using the solution pack, you get all these pre-configured, we call them server templates because they're a little different than just the virtual, than VMs, than virtual machines. And then you're able to customize them further, but what's a key distinction there is that in a server template, once you boot up a virtual machine that only has the operating system, in fact, only just enough operating system to boot, it starts executing a series of scripts at boot time that install and configure things. So what you can do when you need to modify things is you make changes to the scripts, and think of it as DNA that builds the machine each time based on exactly what you need it to be. So if you're looking for a really fancy way of saying that, you can say it self-contextualizes itself each time, and you can change the DNA, the server template, that's going to build that machine. And one of the things it does along the process there is grab the PHP app that it's going to need. And the cluster manager from Zend, places a role in making sure that all the application servers have the right PHP app in there. So it's very modular and very easy to maintain. It's really designed that way to make all this application lifecycle management be dramatically less work intensive as it is today.
And not only is it just modular, but I also like the version control that RightScale has built into their script and template management system. So you have your own little version control. You can roll back to the template as it was, last Tuesday or 2 years ago, or only roll out this new change to these servers to test it, and then roll it out to the rest of them later.
Yeah,
that's a very powerful feature.
And let me mention, because I actually forgot to say it in the beginning, we purposely didn't go very deep on all the details of RightScale and of Zend, but we've done many webinars where we just cover technical topics related to that, so that we don't distract that from this particular conversation. Anybody listening to this, if you go to rightscale.com/webinars, plural, webinars with an S at the end, you can see many webinars that we have there, and some of them are strictly RightScale Zend and exactly how it all works, and some of them are about cloud computing in general for those that are more interested in that. But bringing it back to Mediaspike, Mark, I have a question here about how you handle the staff training for the rollout, and did you need any kind of specialized consultants, or did you go at it alone? You already mentioned a little bit about the virtual on-site and all that. Maybe you could just speak a little bit more about what we've been calling the premium onboarding, how we help you guys get rolling in the beginning.
Sure. The only external consultants that we used during our cutover from single server to enterprise class cloud were the RightScale onboarding team and the virtual on-site sessions. It began with the onboarding team came up with the initial architecture diagram that went into more detail than just the block level diagram that we show here, or that is on the standard RightScale Zend presentation slide. They went into more detail with it there. We got that part finished in a couple of days, and then dove into the virtual on-site sessions to get the nitty-gritty details hammered out. But it was, for the most part, very smooth and productive.
Excellent. So, Mark, this is Kent again. So we've been talking a lot about your production environment, but I think what might also be interesting is how the cloud impacted your development and how you go about application development now these days, because I would imagine that's probably a little different than what you did before as well.
It's incredibly different. We actually have a development environment now.
So maybe if we want to go forward one more slide, I think that's a good lead in to the next slide. Here we go.
Absolutely. There it is. So what do we do for development here at Mediaspike? All of our developers use Zend Studio. We will either push our code to an in-house Zend server that we have here, or laptops on the road. We have a VM instance running there that mimics the production servers as much as possible on a laptop VM. But that's the internal development testing. Once that's working, we'll commit it to our source code control, move it up to the testing server, and test, then we push to production. Our testing/development server is a subset of the production deployment that is also hosted in the Amazon cloud and managed with RightScale. It lacks much of the redundancy that the production environment has, but all of the key pieces are there, so we can get an accurate feel for how it runs in the cloud on our specified architecture.
So let's talk about that for a second. So you have a deployment and a set of templates that create this redundant environment. When you wanted to create something for testing, obviously you don't need database failover, a few other things. How easy was that to do? I mean, was that something that was relatively easy for you to accomplish, and how did you go about that?
Well, it was, as long as it didn't involve changes to the database, it wasn't that bad. As long as we were able to do our development and testing with data in the database that was, say, 2 to 3 or 6 months old, it wasn't that bad. The problem is you can't do your testing on 6-month-old data. And so in order to replicate our database into a development environment, it was an literally hours-long process to move that data over and be ready to start again. And now with the Elastic Block snapshots on Amazon, it literally is 15 to 20 minutes to replicate live production database into the development environment. And because it's so easy to do, because it's a couple of clicks and you're done, we do it all the time. It's almost a daily process now. So we'll just start the day with fresh copy from the live servers.
And it's safe to say you didn't do that before.
We never did that before.
And as far as setting up the environment, it seems like it's sort of a simpler version of the templates you already have. You just sort of simplify the templates a little bit and you're done.
We started with our production environment. When we had that the way we liked it, we cloned that deployment and then just took machines out. And what we were left with became our development environment.
And how long did that take when you decided to do that? So in a day you had created your testing environment from your production environment.
Yes. Yes.
And Mark, if I can ask you, how has that changed? Like, what kind of business impact have you seen from that? So can you take on more stuff, or is it the fact that you're no longer stressed out about something just going outside and now you're in fire drill mode to try to fix something? Are you able to experiment with more campaigns and programs? Like, what's the bottom line for you guys in having this increased capabilities and simplicity?
I think we talk about that on the next slide, if we want to jump ahead one.
All right. I think there's a little bit of a lag when I forward the slide, but yes.
That's okay. So these are some of the benefits that we've recognized, and these are just the really high-level ones. From a developer standpoint, from the responsible for keeping the sites up all the time standpoint, we have no more single point of disastrous failure. Nothing is going to take down the business for hours or days at a time. The most we're looking at depends on how close you are to a laptop and an internet connection to relaunch a database or something. But knock on wood, everything has been great. All of our failure points are gone. Our MySQL master slave replication, it just works. Anybody who's struggled with this in the past and knows what it's like to get that, slave out of sync message, here you just don't get that. It works, and the EBS snapshots make the restore process, drop dead simple and wicked fast.
And you have geographical redundancy on your database backups as well, too.
Should it be necessary, it's already there.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before on our previous solution, where we would just go in and from time to time edit a file on the live site, we're not doing that anymore. Everything is scripted. All of our build process is scripted. So it's literally click and here's a new production deployment, and click and it's live. Everything is repeatable. Everything is reliable. And so we do it the right way all the time. And in the cases where it changes, we have the flexibility to add or change the architecture if we need it. And then, of course, we haven't found the upper limit for the capacity yet.
Well,
yeah, and
don't ever find one, but
I can tell you, Mark, because a lot of the Facebook games use RightScale, that you can have quite literally tens of millions of people hitting a website that can run just fine.
I can't wait till we have those problems.
Yeah. It's a fantastic situation to be in. I have some more questions that are coming in, Mark. And somebody's asking about why you set up a separate data warehouse and what role does it play when you already have a production database?
Sure. The data warehousing that we're doing at this time is primarily for a lot of log information, and because of the volume of material, the volume of data that we're processing, it will slow down the live production servers to keep them busy doing that much extra logging capabilities and whatnot. And then once you're actually done with the information, then we need to send it through an ETL process to translate it into a format that's easier for us to run reports on. The schema of the production database is optimized for delivering data to the site. The schema for the data warehouse is optimized for delivering reports to management.
So, Mark, have you guys gone as far as calculating an ROI for the solution? Somebody's asking about ROI. I don't know if they mean exact dollars or percentages, but were you guys able to quantify it, or is it more of a gut check that you see how it's helping the business overall?
Well, it's hard to put an ROI number on this because we went from a single server to dozens of servers. Obviously, our monthly server bill increased significantly, but at the same time, it was significantly less than if we had gone with a managed hosting solution for this. But more importantly than just looking at the dollars is looking at the increased capability that it gives to the business, both from peace of mind as a developer, but also the capacity that marketing now has to drive bigger and larger campaigns. The ability that we have as a business to go after larger clients and say, yes, we can fulfill that order for you, where before that wasn't something we could necessarily say. So in that term, in that respect, the ROI has been off the charts.
Yeah,
I've move for us.
I've heard of that use case or that benefit before, where it sort of unleashes the sales team, when in the past you could maybe sell something that you couldn't quite actually deliver on, and being able to unshackle that it can be useful.
Exactly.
Let me tackle a question. It's actually a fragmentary question. I need to interpret it here. Somebody's asking if there's an Amazon component for the database snapshots, and if I'm interpreting your question correctly, the answer is yes. The way the server templates, we call it the MySQL Manager because it's set up to be a master-slave setup, and as Mark was saying, you don't need to worry about the nuts and bolts if you don't want to. Everything's transparent, so you can customize it and you can tweak it if you want, but it pretty much works out of the box. So the way it works is the slave database does a snapshot of its EBS volume once an hour, and it timestamps it so that if you ever need to recover, it's very easy to just grab the freshest and the newest copy of the database. And it's the complexity and the engineering work has already been taken care of, and we just make it available as a component into the solution pack. It actually leads me to the next question that I was going to tackle here, which is somebody asking, I think they were asking Mark, but let me take a pass at it first, Mark, and if you want to add something. They were asking what you think of NoSQL solution in this example. Let me just address it generally, and if there's an application for Mediaspike, please add information. From the way the solution works, this open platform as a service that Kent and I have been describing, it means that you can quite literally take out the MySQL Manager and replace it with a NoSQL solution, Cassandra, Couchbase, MongoDB. We actually have server templates for these different things. Or you can add another tier, just like Mark added a data warehouse to the production database. There's many cases where some data does belong in a SQL database. It lends itself very well to columns and rows. And there's other data that's much better for a schema-less kind of approach. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. What we see, I'm talking about now myself empirically actually, you see companies and projects where it makes sense to put things in a NoSQL store and a key value pair kind of store, and other things belong in a database. So that's where we went with this idea of not trying to make technology solutions for people, but more provide an open platform where they can then customize as they might need it.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up exactly how we've experienced it as well. When we needed to add new functionality, there was already a RightScale template to do what we needed it to do, and modification beyond that was changing a couple of config files. And whether we're not doing any NoSQL at the moment, but I know that the templates are there, and I'm sure it would be as simple as point-click launch.
So there's another question here, Yuri, which I think I'll take because it's sort of related to RightScale and it's sort of related to Zend. There's a question here. that's talking about how the nodes are added, and since they're added automatically from a predefined server template, someone is asking the question is, can you define a node with special non-replicatable properties, say a master node, that has scripts or cron jobs running on it that you don't want to run on any of the other servers? And is this possible by a Zend Server Cluster Manager? So let me sort of talk about that in a couple different ways. One is Zend Server has built into it a piece of functionality called Job Queue that allows you to define both asynchronous jobs that execute completely asynchronously. Think about like responding to somebody when they check out and sending them shipping information later. That's one possibility. The other thing is it does have a cron-like capability to allow you to run PHP scripts on a regularly scheduled basis, and it has quite a few controls for how you go about doing that, which would probably let you accomplish this entirely within PHP and entirely within Zend Server without doing anything. However, as also a RightScale solution to this as well, which would be that one could define a server, start with the standard Zend Server template, and in RightScale you could add a few more scripts to that template, turn that into a master node, and then your deployment might say, start one of these master nodes and an array of 0 to n regular nodes, and let the regular nodes scale up and down with the master node could be fixed, and you could probably even define failover for the master node to restart if it failed, and a number of other things. So RightScale does give you the flexibility to handle this in literally, probably dozens of different ways if the Zend built-in capabilities didn't take care of exactly what you were trying to do. So the short answer is yes, you could do this. It could be done in a bunch of different ways. And I don't know, Mark, if you even have anything like that where you need to run scripts periodically on one server but not on all of them or anything like that. I don't know if you've dealt with anything like that as part of Mediaspike.
We do, but we don't limit them to running on just one of the server nodes because our environment is duplicated across all nodes. All nodes are identical, and they don't really care which one comes first. We have a separate location where our cron jobs are launched from, and most of them are launched as HTTP calls. So it's just a process that runs on whichever node gets the call.
So you built a thing that kicks them off, and then it runs it to the HTTP, which goes through the load balancer, and then one of the servers takes over that job and processes it. Okay.
Exactly.
And yet another way to solve the problem. So several ways to handle that kind of thing.
So Ken, let me move into another question here, and I'm keeping an eye on the time. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. What is the contingency if Amazon has another S3 outage? I think the person asking the question meant EBS, Elastic Block Storage, not S3. Let me answer it as is. We very much preach this idea of multi-cloud in having geographically distributed architecture. So Rackspace, for example, just to name one of our other partners, and we have several, has a service called Cloud Files. So even though Amazon provides a really incredible SLA on files you store in S3, and I encourage anybody on this webinar to just go read it directly on their website, you can actually store things in more than one provider's storage service. In this case, Cloud Files is more or less equivalent to S3, and other providers have options like that. Now, if you meant EBS instead, because the outage that I think this person was referring to was EBS, more or less the same question applies. We have customers that were following our best practices in terms of how you deploy environments when that EBS outage occurred, or degree of service, I think is the way that Amazon described it, a few months back. And if you architect things right, you can actually either survive unscathed or only have minimal impact to the performance. It very much becomes a question of architecture and how much you're willing to build in terms of redundancies and as it relates to cost versus the potential failure modes that you can encounter. These kind of questions get very much into the devil's in the details kind of thing. So I encourage anybody that wants to really talk about the nuts and bolts of that to just give us a call. We have email and phone numbers up on the screen. That's exactly the kind of conversation we love getting into. like understand somebody's requirements, explaining the kind of things that we can do, and see if our software and our technology is something that can help them.
And what we have done to plan for such a situation is that we have architected a disaster recovery plan that allows us to deploy somewhere else on another giant server or a small group of servers a scaled down version of our application that certainly don't have the capacity that we have now, but we could be up and running within a day of a total disastrous failure. And again, there it's backup and test the recovery all the time.
So there's another question here. What kind of load balancer do you use from Amazon? You build your own. So I'll repeat myself a little bit in this whole idea of the open platform as a service. The architecture and the design that you saw in those diagrams uses HA proxy. The advantage of that is that in the case of somebody's in the question says from Amazon, Amazon has a service called ELB, Elastic Load Balancer, and you're certainly free to use that. Again, this whole idea of open platform as a service, you can make design choices. The thing is, if you use that, it makes it significantly more complicated to make that architecture portable, as Mark was just describing, for disaster recovery reasons. So by making it HA proxy, we know that the HA proxy server template runs in Amazon, runs in Rackspace, runs in SoftLayer, in LogicWorks, and lots of our other data center or infrastructure as service partners that we have. And that's where these specific design choices come to bear. And do we have any more questions then? I think we might be coming into an end. Kent and Mark, unless you tell me you have one more comment or questions that you want to take, I think we might be reaching the end of the webinar here.
My only comment, like I said, business is good. Mediaspike is hiring developers. My email address is right there if you're interested.
Wonderful. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for your time. Once again, I'll encourage you to contact RightScale or Zend. We love getting into the specific technical details of your requirements and conversation to understand if there's something that we can help. And for any colleague you might have that was not able to attend today, note that this webinar is recorded. I think it will go up tomorrow. It doesn't quite make it the same day, and you can point other people to it if they want to watch it later on. With that, I'm bringing the webinar to a close. Thank you very much for your time today.